to have to pay large upfront amounts to get started on their digitalization journey. The other thing we heard repeatedly was the lack of flexibility, which we wanted to bring. So every platform of our client is a little bit different because we think that every business model is a little bit different. So this is what we offer. And so digitalization is really it's more than just transferring your data on a platform. It's really a new process that is going to grow with you and your business. And so this is what Upia does. So we're very interested into the clean cooking area because we see more and more clients including these products to distribute them. And I think also the pay-go functionality for electric cook stove is going to make a big difference. And so, yeah, digitalization was a big factor in the revolution of the SHS sector, and I think it's gonna be the same for the clean cooking industry or category, especially in light of the carbon credit programs that are increasing massively.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kola Oshinawo. I'm the CEO for Baobab Plus in Nigeria. Baobab Plus is part of the Baobab Group, which is a microfinance services institution. We're currently in 6 countries in Africa. And what we do is to provide access to energy, digital, and ultimately financial inclusion. We're doing this by leveraging solar home systems in the rural communities, then also using distributing productive use appliances both in peri-rural areas and in urban areas to serve the SMEs. Ultimately, we want to also deepen mobile smartphone penetration, so we also offer access to digital. And with this layer, it leads into financial inclusion because a lot of our customers do not have credit history. So by acquiring assets on the pay-as-you-go model, they're able to build financial credibility that we pass on to our microfinance sister organization for them to be able to offer them loans for their businesses and other areas. So essentially, we're using this sales and distribution, last mile sales and distribution channel to also distribute cook stove. We've seen successes with solar home system and sometimes failures in distribution of solar home system. Because we're speaking to the same market segment for clean cooking, we're sort of building on that stack to be able to offer these consumers the opportunity to acquire clean cooking products. And during the course of the conversation, I can share some of the lessons that we've learned, as well as some of the mistakes and failures from the solar home system distribution side as well. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dennis Owino Onono. I work for Global Distributors Collective. So as a senior consultant, Global Distributors Collective, as the name suggests, is a collective of last mile distributors across the globe. We support them with a lot of knowledge support, technical advice, and tools that enable them reach the last mile consumers. We have over 160 members, and we are sector agnostic. So all the distributors and last mile distributors in the Global Distributor Collective sell life-changing products from water filters, solar home systems, and clean cooking solutions. Over the last couple of years, we've really managed to support most of our members, and we've seen a lot of changes and growth within the sector, and then specifically in the last mile distribution sector. So for us, this is something that is at the heart of what we do and how we support our members as last mile distributors in changing the world, specifically using clean cooking as a tool of impact in improving the environment and the world as a whole. Thank you.
Great. Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Sierra Rimmerscheid, and I work at 60 Decibels as the Deputy Energy Lead, also working on our gender work. For those who may not know 60 Decibels, we are a social impact measurement and customer insights company, and so what that means is we work directly with funders, with enterprises, with government donors, philanthropies, et cetera, to understand the impact that off-grid solar companies, clean cooking companies are having for the end consumer. And so what our methodology is all about is primarily talking to these customers through remote phone surveys, using our sort of cadre of trained, locally trained research associates who speak to customers in local languages, from which our team then analyzes the data to provide sort of technical assistance and insights for companies to both help improve business operations, as well as sort of insights on the type of impact you may be having by different segmentation, whether that be gender or age, education level, poverty level, et cetera. And I'll be speaking today about our sort of adjacent work that 60 Decibels also conducts in the MFI space. So we launched the first MFI index report earlier this summer, which encompasses the results of 70 companies across 40 countries and the voices of 17,000 different consumers. So lots to unpack there and share with you all. So thanks again for being here.
Thanks everyone for the introductions. I'm very excited to get into the panel today. We're going to give you guys a warm-up question before we start making you jump into failure immediately. So to start out, Sierra, maybe I can actually start with you and build on your point about the MFI work you've been doing with consumers and looking at consumers. What have been your key insights been with MFIs and consumers? What are the similarities and differences we see between your insights for clean cooking consumers and other sectors?
Great. Thank you, Lindsay. Yeah, so as I mentioned, 60 Decibels just launched our Microfinance Index. It's the first of its kind for the sector and the first for us. And wanted to touch on sort of three of the key findings from those results. And first, so I think we as a sector know that clean cooking doesn't do the best job it could be at serving low-income customers. By contrast, our work with MFIs has shown that group lending MFIs outperformed their individual lending peers by 45% when it comes to reaching low-income customers, and are also much more likely to be reaching female customers. So some interesting thoughts there about how you might think about working with those partners to increase sort of the reach amongst low-income consumers. And this was true across all geographies. Second, we found that for those customers who might be using a microfinance loan for income generating purposes, that represented 25% of the total 17,000 customer base, and amongst those, nearly 4 in 5 saw their incomes increase as a direct result from the loan in their own experience. And then finally, when it comes to this report, the third thing we found is that when it comes to sort of making repayments and financial resiliency, these MFI customers as well, who were using these loans for income generation, were experiencing low repayment burden rates, and more than 75% were saying that they were more financially strong as a result of this loan. So some pretty strong indicators that these loans are actually helping them achieve better financial stability, and the ability to save, earn income, provide more for their families. And when it comes to what we can learn from clean cooking consumers, we recently are still concurrently running a program with the Clean Cooking Alliance Venture Catalyst program. And what we've been able to see so far are two really important correlations that have been verified. And so the first has to do with customers' experience of challenges and issue resolution and the Net Promoter Score. And so for those who may not know, the Net Promoter Score is essentially a gauge by which to understand whether or not a customer would be likely to recommend your product or service to friends and families. And what we found is that For customers who experience fewer challenges and higher rates of issue resolution, the NPS score is drastically higher, which I think is a little unsurprising but important to be verified. And the second is that there's also a direct correlation between the number of unserved and low-income customers a company is reaching. And so essentially what that means is as a company is reaching more customers who are accessing a product for the first time, they are also more likely to be reaching low-income customers. And so this says something again about the clean cooking sector's ability to potentially reach more of these low-income customers by targeting customers who would also be accessing a product for the first time. And that's it from me. Thanks, Lindsay.
Thanks, Sierra, and we're going to come back to this theme of consumer finance shortly. But also, Kola, I'm going to ask you to touch on this as well. Which is to say, could you share a little more of the lessons learned from Balboa Plus's experience creating a last mile distribution business from an MFI and then reintegrating those products back to the MFI? And is the enthusiasm around MFI partnerships a realistic probability for the space to reduce challenges seen in SHS for consumer financing?
Thanks, Lindsay. I'll just mention some couple of lessons that has helped us with our success in most of the markets where we operate. The first thing is that the customer base is not homogeneous, and that's part of what most people in last mile distribution understand. As you go from the urban areas to the rural frontier, the customers continue to differ, and the kind of products that you offer them must differ. You cannot go straight to the rural frontier and offer them electric cookers. You need to start building the right product for the right market segment. So understanding your market segmentation is very critical. The second thing is that you must be prepared to conduct a wedding and manage a funeral at the same time. What do I mean? When you are selling, you are conducting a wedding with the customer. That's building the relationship. And what we've done at Balboa Plus is to make sure that we're not just relying on technology alone. It's online meeting offline. So we have agents, so we're leveraging last mile agents in the various communities who are influential, who understand the customers, who understand the terrain, to reach the customer, determine their ability to repay, because we use a pay-as-you-go model, because you don't want to also burden that customer if they cannot afford the product. It's the agent in that community who knows them, what they do, that can give you more insights and able to determine the right fit, which product fits a particular customer, so there are no overselling. The second thing is that you do not separate the sales from the customer's experience, which is after sales. The reason why a lot of people, they want to pay, but if the product is not working for them and nobody is ready to fix it, and I mean, with report from 60 decibels, you also see that it's a big pain. They need somebody that they can see physically that can resolve their issue, not calling somebody on the phone or waiting for one system to help them. So they trust that agent. Then the last part of the work of that agent is to make sure that they're also incentivized on both the wedding and on the funeral, meaning that they're incentivized on the sales side, but they're also incentivized on the ability to collect money from the customers. And it's easier because when somebody lives in your street or in your community, you know them, they know you. So it becomes like a social obligation for you to be able to pay back. Then finally is to understand that you cannot do everything. It's a stack. And that's the lesson from Solar Home System. We've seen companies who want to be the manufacturer, they want to be the distributor, they want to be the financier, they want to do after sales. You cannot do everything at the same time except you have very deep pockets. So what we've chosen to do is to focus on sales and distribution and leverage our sister company for financing. Lastly, you cannot offer one solution in terms of pay-as-you-go or financing solution for everybody. Some will go on pay-as-you-go, some will go on what we call top-up loans, where they're already going to the microfinance institution to get loans. So we just had a bit of a certain percentage on top and say, look, you can take more because we've already verified you have the ability to repay. Take a bit more to be able to afford a renewable energy product. Then, lastly, you also need to leverage other last mile distributors, their e-commerce companies, logistics companies, agency networks as well, that you can leverage to do the last mile distribution. And this is what is helping us. And we'll continue to balance profits as well with risk.
It's really interesting to hear about your kind of journey on specialization, and I think it's something that we'll hear continue throughout the answers in the panel. Dennis, I'm going to turn to you because actually that was a really big buzzword for the Global Distributors Collective, hearing lots of emphasis on last mile distributors. So what would you say the key tools and resources you've seen necessary to scale last mile distributors, and the key lessons learned from your members and the challenges they've faced?
Thanks, Lindsay. So, from the Global Distributors Collective, the main sole reason that it was formed is 4 or 5 years ago, all these last mile distributors across the world were working in silos. So the question was, how do we get them together so we can speak with one voice? Because most of the challenges do cut across different geographies, different companies in terms of sizes, different products that they sell, but there were so many underlying themes that cut across. So from what we've seen as a Global Distributors Collective, the first thing I'll speak about the power of people first. And when I say people first, is through what we've seen in our membership, the companies and last mile distributors who've really thought through how do they put their people first. So when I say people, for example, the last mile sales agent, how do you hire, how do you incentivize them, and how do you maintain them? But it's not just about that. Then how does that translate into that same person selling a life-impacting product to the last mile consumer? And then how do you support these people within that value chain with digitalization? And then how do you hire, from a strategic point of view, people who manage that whole, I would say, system? And lastly will be the companies that we've seen that do take time to understand their last mile consumer, and then working together with product manufacturers, designing custom-made products that work for people and not the other way around. So it's been something that we've seen with certain examples that with different partnerships that have worked together to design custom-made products for last mile consumers, and the last mile distributor do get revenue from that. And it's a partnership that we do believe is more sustainable, and it can definitely lead to better designed products that fit the end user consumer. And therefore, if we go through the value and the theory of change, we do anticipate the outcomes and the impact will be realized through that sort of a model. Within that, we've designed tools, for example, is in our knowledge hub within the Global Distributors Collective, a catalog of digital products that are completely free of charge, and anyone will be able to go in and download. And what we've also tried to do is to help with the customization of some of these products, and we are definitely happy that we have Upia here who can speak more to that. But definitely for us, we've seen that we can design and offer these tools which otherwise would not have been there, and most of our membership do not even have an idea that there are certain digitalization tools that are available for free that you can actually use and then make better use of them.
It's
great to hear about some of the digital tools and resources that GDC is pulling together. And actually, we have one of them on stage. So Emily, I'm going to turn to you, which is, what has the role of digitization been in other sectors, and what do you think it will be for clean cooking?
Thank you. So I think a couple of lessons we've learned. The first one is that digitalization, has to be an ironclad decision from the top down. So leadership has to make a really, really strong decision as to the fact that they're going on this journey, and it can't just be signing the contract and expecting the rest of the company to move, because nobody likes change. It doesn't matter if the change is going to end up making your life easier in the future, but at the point of change, people are generally unhappy about it, because they've been doing things a certain way for years, and you're asking them to suddenly do it a different way. So, I mean, the most successful onboarding we've seen was when leadership was here from the beginning. They were here at each training. They had an official kickoff meeting on the day where they were switching to UPIA. So that's one of the lessons we learned. The other one is that the real cost of digitalizing your business is not so much the price tag of the software, it's the cost in time. Because you want to train people properly. If you have hundreds of agents, it's not going to happen overnight. It will probably take weeks to train all these agents. So that is actually the real investment. So that's the second lesson. Another one is that it's going to happen in a way. You cannot scale without digitalizing your business. So in a way, the sooner you do it, the better you are, because you don't have the headaches of migration later on and training hundreds of people. Yeah, so these are three lessons I think we can take from the solar home system sector.
Thanks so much, Emily. And I guess now to the moment we've all been waiting for. We're going to turn to failure. What do you see as the greatest failure to learn from your respective sectors, and what would you bring from that to clean cooking? You knew it was coming, so looking forward to the response.
Great. Thanks, Lindsay. So I don't know if I would say this is the greatest failure per se, but I think a thing that has really stood out to me as a result of the Microfinance Index is the sort of lack of a deep difference in impact for male and female customers of loans. I think often when we talk about gender or products that might be benefiting women disproportionately, we do that with a lot of assumptions and with hypotheses that maybe aren't totally rooted sort of in truth. And so I think my thoughts here, what they're really about is sort of saying, you know, if you think about women's empowerment, there might be 4, 5, 6, 7 different dimensions there. And I think right now we assume that for every product or for every service, there's a direct correlation, right, between potentially microfinance or clean cooking and time use, or microfinance and clean cooking in another dimension. And instead, what we should be thinking about is, where do we reasonably believe there might actually be correlative tissue there, and can we start first building a knowledge base to think about like the deeper questions so that we can either A, confirm whether there really is a limited difference, you know, for microfinance customers when it comes to gender, or if we're just not asking the right questions. And I think it's probably the latter, but definitely more to unpack there.
A lot of food for thought there. Dennis, can I turn to you?
For us, and what we've seen is, given the sector that most of our membership do sell a lot of solar home systems just by design, and what we've seen in the last report that we put out, the state of the sector, the number one issue that came that our membership was saying is access to finance. And to see how local last mile distributors are more affected as opposed to international distributors. And for us, we do know that they are the ones who really have the capacity to have the biggest impact at a local level towards to the end consumer. So I think there is an opportunity there, and we've done a lot of work in terms of how, first of all, we can better prepare most of these last mile distributors to be investment ready, and there are tools that we're designing with them and also to help them implement. But I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, and most of our membership, they're just almost a crisis away from giving up, so, and going under. And there will be the same distributors who will be able to carry additional life-changing products, for example, with cook stoves and such. So I think right now what we've seen on the solar home system, and it's something that we can learn from there and see how to best support distributors who specifically think they can now carry additional products with clean cooking.
Thanks, Dennis. I think I'm already hearing an access and equity theme coming through those first two answers. Kola, can I turn to you?
Yes, thanks. I think the first failure is not building a risk culture within the teams, within the value chain, within the whole system, especially for solar home system on pay-as-you-go. And that's why you see a lot of defaults and with customers and all of that. So a lot of solar pay-as-you-go companies, if they don't build that risk culture from day one, and it is the tone at the top, right from the CEO to the agent at the last mile, understanding that it is not just about sales, it's also about the risk and assessing the customer fit for the product and ensuring that they are not overselling, because you do have agents who oversell, overpromise, but also putting another layer of check. So making sure that beyond the agent, do you also have another layer that checks that the customer is fit for that product? Because you don't also want to burden the customer with debt, and at the end of the day, where you are trying to solve one problem, you are creating another one. So building a risk culture is one failure that we are also learning from our competitors and other markets where we operate. The second one is that you must have different business models. If you're doing pay-as-you-go, you must also factor opportunities for cash business and leveraging other sales channels across board. So microfinance institutions, using your agent network, using e-commerce channels to do the first mile delivery for you. So all of this, there's no one business model. So you continue to iterate till you find the right fit for a particular market. Lastly, last mile distribution is logistics business. And a lot of companies tend to forget that doing logistics in Africa is very intense, it's very costly, but you also need to leverage people that are already doing the logistics. If they already have the platform, if they already have the network, why not leverage them while you are also trying to build last mile logistics? So for me, those three things: risk, multiple business models, and continue to iterate so you find the right fit. Then also understanding the fact that it's a logistics business and leveraging other organizations in driving your logistics will be key to success.
Thanks so much, Kola. Emily, can I turn to you?
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to rejoin you here exactly, actually, because I think one of the biggest failures we've seen is the solar home system distributor not analyzing the risk properly, because the important thing for them is to sell. And so we see them because we can see the defaulted or the locked units, and we can see how big the data collection is that they gather, which is sometimes really, really little. So they're not asking the right questions because they want to sell as fast as possible, deploy as many units as possible. So this is, this is a failure we've seen as well. Just in terms of digitalization, I guess it's a bit the other side of the coin of my previous answer, but it's really leadership not owning the process and not making such a big deal out of it. That is usually where the digitalization journey basically stops before it started.
Thanks, Emily. I'm going to ask one more question, and then we're going to turn it over to you, audience, so be ready. If MFIs or other seasoned consumer lenders play only a small role in the clean cooking sector, is company-led consumer financing, or PAYGO, the only pathway to fill the consumer financing vacuum? Where else can this consumer financing come from? Take first stab?
Yeah, I can try. I think beyond PAYGO, like I said, you need to find other consumer financing. One way, I mean, and maybe we'll talk about this later, is on how do you leverage, I don't want to call it's subsidies or carbon credits, but how do you build an engine that allows you to be able to distribute carbon credits? I think that's the way we also need to flip the conversation. Beyond selling the products, can you also sell carbon credits as a way of also financing consumption of the product? Because ultimately, and if you see with solar home systems, the moment the system is switched off, it's of no use to the customer, it's of no use to you. So how do you ensure that there's consumption of the product, whether it is clean cooking, whether it is solar home system, and you leverage the distribution of carbon credits as another business model to finance the solar home system or clean cooking and the likes. So maybe we need to start rethinking the business model. Then secondly, companies need to start looking at the unit economics of their business. How do you ensure that you balance the financing options that you have today? There are some microfinance institutions that are already providing loans to these customers. Can you also include this product as part of the loans that they are giving these customers, and it becomes a cash business for you, which is what we do today as one side of it? Can you also finance directly to the customers and make sure that you're also driving the collection properly, which is riskier, but you balance the risk with both cash as well as pay as you go. And you put that in the proper unit economics such that even if there's no subsidies, how do you make sure that you're still profitable at the end of the day?
Thanks, Colin. Does anybody else want to add?
Yeah, I think carbon credit, despite the difficulties around it, is going to play a large role in increasing the uptake in clean cooking. I mean, it's happening already. We have a client who deploys tens of thousands every month of cook stoves. So I think that will make a big difference.
Here? Okay. Great, then we're going to turn to the audience now, and feel free to pick up on that question or to introduce some new ones. I'm going to take 2 questions at a time for the panelists. If you have a specific panelist that you'd like to direct the question to, feel free, or we can direct ourselves. Silence from the audience. Oh, okay, perfect.
Hi, I have a question specifically for the 60 decibels team. I was wondering if you could provide any examples or cases in which you've used consumer insights to help a given clean cooking business like turn or drive success, or something was going wrong and the consumer insights were used to solve a challenge.
Sorry, I'm just having a hard time hearing. I just want to make sure I heard
sorry.
you right. No, that's okay.
I was wondering if you can give a specific example or a case in which you have used consumer insights from a clean cooking business to help them turn their operations around if something was going wrong, or help them drive success, and how then you quantified the success from that.
Sure, yeah, I'll answer that after we take the next question.
So one of the common themes I heard is don't push revenue, right? Don't chase revenue and just sell for the sake of selling, because your portfolio quality deteriorates, right? Agreed, right? On the solar home systems experience. How are we going to avoid how are we going to avoid the tendency or the temptation to sell with consumer finance of one shape or another and push revenue for the sake of revenue, and then end up with the same mess of people not being able to afford whatever product they buy?
I didn't get it.
Sorry guys, we can
Oh, you can't hear?
It's the echo.
Oh. It's, yeah, I don't know, what do I do? I shout. The revenue, right? You were saying what happened in the solar industry, sell, and then you end up with a massive repayment problem, right? How do we avoid that in the clean cooking? How do we not make the same mistake of just pushing either subsidized stoves or stoves with some kind of consumer finance attached to it?
So to reiterate, I think the question, and Rocio, please tell me if I'm got it right, is that within the SHS sector, the history was to sell, and then down the line you're dealing with what is a pretty messy repayment crisis on your hands. How do we rethink repayment for clean cooking so that we don't repeat that mistake? Did I get it okay? And I think there's several people who might want to think about that.
Great. Maybe while they mull that over, I can answer the question about an example. And so, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we do every day, right? Is we conduct these lean data projects. We then deliver an insights report to companies. And, you know, there's a host of sort of core 60 decibels indicators we include in every project. And for example, a couple of these are, what is your challenge rate? So how many of your customers are experiencing a challenge? And of those, how many people are actually having their issues resolved. And this kind of ties back to what Kola was saying about after-sales customer service and the relationship you have with customers there. And so I think my experience of companies hearing these results when they see, oh wow, I'm having 45% of my customers experiencing a challenge, but 80% of them aren't having their issue resolved, it kind of sets off an alarm that might be something they really need to look at. And so the hope through the insights we would provide is that you then are able then to go through your raw data, see maybe specifically which customers are having those challenges. Then you can start putting your post sales service team on that, thinking about replacements, fixes for products that might be broken, et cetera.
Sierra, any takers for the question on managing repayment into clean cooking?
Okay, so I mean, there are a couple of ways you can do this. I mean, for us, what works, or what we've seen that works for us, is that we look at the customers that have purchased solar home systems. We look for certain patterns. The first thing is their first repayment. Did they fail? If a customer fails the first repayment, there's a problem with that particular, the ability of that customer to repay. Secondly, you must see yourself as a life partner of that customer, meaning that you want to be able to replace most of the appliances or give them access to energy with different appliances. So what we do is we look at customers that have done like 50%, 60% of their repayment on solar home systems, because some of the cook stove are not metered, so and you can't shut it down like solar home system or productive use appliances. So customers that have passed a certain stage of repayment and have not failed on a weekly basis or on a monthly basis to repay, you'll be able to include the cook stove as part of their solar home system offering, and you recalibrate again. It doesn't increase how much they pay on a weekly or on a monthly basis, but it just extends the period they are with you. And that is one way of ensuring that you are beginning to build loyalty with those customers while also taking risk into consideration. That is one of the ways that we found that really works, and we continue to monitor. Like I said, it's an iterative process. Until you find the right model before you can say this is a foolproof model. But what we also see is that from the day one, your ability to sell right to the customer is also key, and that's why these last mile agents are very important. And if you're incentivizing them more on sales and not on risk, then they will do more sales. If you're incentivizing them more on risk, then they will be very careful not to oversell to those customers.
Can I add something as well? I think there's also a difference if you're a distributor of solar home system and you're still here. It means you, first of all, you did something right, and also you might have learned from your mistake of not analyzing the risk properly the first time around. So if you now go into clean cooking, you'll use the lessons you've learned. If you're only distributing clean cooking, then it's a little bit different because you didn't have the benefit of learning from your mistakes the first time around. So I guess one way to get also more investments in the clean cooking category, it will also be to have better data, to have base case, to document through time, to be able to show the impact you have. So that might help as well in terms of analyzing your clients a little bit better.
I'm going to take my sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to add one additional thing. So 60 Decibels has been working with GOGLA, they're the Global Off-Grid Lighting Association, in case you're unaware of who they are, on basically translating a code of consumer protection principles into a lean data assessment. And what's come out of sort of this recent research with them, which is really interesting, is trying to understand the extent to which, right, customers actually have a clear sense of contract language of what their repayment schedule is, what happens if they don't make repayments. And so I think there's also something interesting in the sort of delta between what is the actual understanding of what a customer ultimately does sort of take away from a contract after they've signed it versus what they say they understand, and sort of how that matches up to their repayment rates or other behaviors. And so just an additional sort of layer to think about when it comes to sort of consumer protection.
Yeah, so lastly, I just also wanted to share with clean cooking, it's more of behavioral change. So in the early sectors, for example, when you're speaking with solar home systems, speaking about repayment, the drive was repayment, repayment, repayment. But with clean cooking, usage is really key. And most of when that is the anchoring message, and it's layered on the level of impact that most of the consumers will see, and on a day-to-day basis, when they use it, then it's easy to communicate the repayment and link it to how much impact it has with them, as opposed to if the message is flipped on the other side where you're really driving on the repayment, then there's a bit of a disconnect between the messaging and what they are seeing. So it's something that we've seen some of our members do try in how they instinctively, and also how they coin their messages within SMSs or even within the call center to really drive usage and understanding the impact within usage. And then the last message is now how that links into repayment.
I'm going to take a liberty also as the moderator and switch to give a little bit of an answer, which I also think that the behavior change point is actually an interesting one, because there's a voice we don't have on the panel, which is the voice of the investor. And I think that there's a behavior change opportunity there too that we learned from the SHS sector, which is that there's also a point from the investor lens to say that what's the difference between growth and healthy growth that puts you on a path to profitability. And I think one of the things that we learned from the solar sector was that growth mentality was not only coming from companies, but also investors that are shared across these sectors. So I can't speak for them, but I'm hoping that's also been a key takeaway as we see a lot of work around KPIs, path to profitability, and unit economics work that is hopefully helping to constrain some of the growth in favor of poor repayment. Sorry, I took a liberty there.
Great, thank you for this very useful insights, and you are actually preempting all my questions. So we are moving towards I think, a point where it's not just about investing for growth or sales, but we're also looking at the impact that this investment has on communities. So focusing a lot on the social investment and the social return of investment. And my first question is, are there good examples out there of best practices of companies that have set up tangible metrics to track the social impact of their businesses, and then leveraged and gone on to leverage these metrics to then get more investment into the clean cooking space or even the energy space? And then, of course, my second question is, are there also examples of clean cooking companies that have also used some non-traditional approaches to financing or end-user financing? So, for example, using a layaway model where those who are more savers than borrowers also are part of the affordability conversation, as well as semi-formal or even informal lending groups in the communities, and how that relationship has worked with the companies. Thank you.
Start with those two.
Hi, my name is Pantaleon from Up Energy. My first comment is related to the question that she asked about solar home systems and clean cooking. I think it's important to differentiate that with solar home systems, you are most likely replacing a candle with a much more expensive product. With clean cooking, you are replacing a less efficient stove with a more efficient stove, which means direct, immediate impact for the end user, which also increases their ability to pay because they get direct savings. Now, that said, we also mentioned a bit of comment about behavioral change, and I am asking the entire panel, one industry that I know that has been very, very, close with people in the last mile end users are, farming groups who have helped transform farmer behaviors, both on how they farm, how they source for, their inputs. Do we have any learning from from that particular industry, the agric industry, with clean cooking? Because we are also trying to change behavior, and I think it would be interesting to see if we have any feedback from a similar industry that is changing behavior. Thank you.
Hello. I'll take the lady's first question. Sorry, I didn't catch her name. But I think it's a great question. It's exactly why 60 decibels exists, right? Sort of our belief is that right now there isn't currently standardized social impact metrics in the sector. And what that means and why that's limiting is it's not really possible now to make direct comparisons, right, between the relative performance of companies for, a whole host of reasons. Maybe they're in different subsectors, maybe they're in different geographies, maybe the stage of their business is different. And so what we've built up over the years is through all of our project work, an energy benchmark that looks and has insights and data to benchmark performance across our various indicators at the subsector and geographical level, so that you're then able to say, if you're a solar home system company and you want to know whether or not the score you just got for the net promoter score or your issue resolution is good or bad, I can then say, well, compared to your peers overall, compared to your peers in East Africa, compared to your other peers in the mini-grid space, here are your results. And so I think sort of this benchmarking approach and being able to really index performance in that way is sort of the key to unlock, so that we're all speaking, the same language here when it comes to impact metrics or business performance metrics on the whole.
I can take the second question. Okay, thanks, Pantaleon, for the question. And I think it's an opportunity, especially for Farmers Association. We've been approached by one organization that provides agricultural inputs to millions of farmers in Nigeria, as an example, where they sort of put a package together of various agricultural inputs to this farmers cooperative, and they've asked us that can we also include things like clean cooking, SHS, into that whole agricultural input. And that's what we are also exploring. Another cooperative organizations that we're also exploring are women who do in the fishing community, because a lot of the fish gets wasted. So we are currently providing them with solar-powered freezers. It might also be an opportunity to also introduce cook stoves to them. So all of these adjacent last mile distribution organizations are things that present opportunities for us to be able to deliver clean cooking products. But most importantly is to be able to tailor it to their needs and to the particular environment. And I think it's an opportunity to scale beyond what we currently have. And I do agree it's a behavioral change that needs to happen. For example, we've seen people ask us, oh, why are you not pushing electric stoves? But there's also a cultural issue in certain areas where you want to cook jollof and it doesn't have that firewood smell because of electric stove. But if you're able to give them improved charcoal stove, gradually you start changing that behavior that, look, there's no smoke here. It helps you cook faster. Then you start moving them up the value chain. But just throwing something at them for the first time, you're going to meet a cultural brick wall.
Thanks so much, Kola. I'm being given the signal that we need to wrap up, so I'll just end with this just to say that I recognize that cooking is different, but I also think there's a lot of themes here on equity, access, finance, behavior change that impact all of us as adjacent sectors, to use our thematic word. And then I also wanted to make one quick plug, which is to highlight a recent paper in Energy Research Social Science, which was entitled Lost Learnings, Breaking the Silence of Failure in the Energy and Development Sector. And to encourage you, Iwona, can you give a wave? She can tell you more about the paper, but it mapped very, very closely to our themes on this panel. So let's give everybody a round of applause. Thank you.